All right. Good afternoon. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome back to Uncork's Twitch channel. We're here with you for the fourth week in a row talking about the UDLC, and unfortunately, the last week we'll be talking about it, at least until there's new stuff to talk about. But obviously, no shortage of content coming after this. So, as I said, we're here to talk UDLC, and to help me do that, we've invited Hamilton Hudson, who's on our engineering team, building out a lot of the UDLC. But I'll stop there. And Hamilton, why don't you say hello and tell us more about yourself?
Hi, yeah. I'm Hamilton. As Nick mentioned, I am an engineer here at Uncork, building out tools within the UDLC toolkit. I actually started my journey at Uncork, funny enough, 2 years and a month ago today, exactly. So it's February 24th, 2020. And my first year here, I was on the production support team, which really was an invaluable experience for my technical journey, having always been a technical person, but wanting to do more and explore more, and really getting to start diving into some of the unique and cool problems and challenges to solve. And then I was also working with clients regularly every day and getting to see and witness their insight into what things could really, enhance their experience and increase the functionality, and just all of these different ways that we could build out solutions to further advance these applications that clients were building, was a big part of why I then transitioned over to work in the role I'm currently in and help build out some of these tools. So getting to take that insight and really see, okay, what are people experiencing day to day, and what is maybe not getting thought about, and how can we apply that in a way that makes the experience more seamless.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome story. It's an awesome transition. I know we had Roberto on a few weeks. He had a similar, transition in his time, even just within Uncork. And I think it speaks to two really valuable things about no code. Is one is there's so many people with technical knowledge, with the mindset to build software, test software, support software, all of that. And Uncork is a way to put them, closer to the creation of the tools rather than just the consumer of the tools. So, to me, that's an amazing aspect of it. And also, we also talk about no code as being this mechanism by which the business and the technology gets closer together, right? Because then you take business users and you bring them closer to technology by allowing them to actually do some of the work. But the other side of that is that it brings technology people closer to the business, because now they're working more hand in hand, and they're understanding what the end application is doing, how the users are interfacing with it, why the business is funding it, so on and so forth. And what you said there about working with the clients, and then being able to go into Uncork and do something based on that, it really helps to connect the people and the software, which I think is always going to result in the best possible product.
Yeah, absolutely. It 100%. There's so many ways to bridge that gap here at Uncork, all these different connections and ways to collaborate, to bridge some of these gaps that maybe are harder in other scenarios. Not just my journey, mine's one of many, right? And there's all these connections happening every day that lead us to ways we can improve. It's really cool.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I want to hear your thoughts about one more thing before we jump in. As we, highlighted last week when we had Elle on, it's International Women's Month. And obviously women in technology is, it's a big thing, and it's an important thing. And I'd love to, hear, your thoughts on, what's that's meant to you, career in your life, and what this month kind of means.
Totally. I think it's interesting what you just said about getting those different perspectives and having, sort of maybe typically disparate groups come closer and closer together to find solutions makes the best software and creates the best tools. That applies not just in terms of role, but people coming to the table. So having varied perspectives and people with varied experiences is going to make your software better. Not that I don't think anyone's going in with the intention of, I'm only going to solve for myself. Like, everyone wants to try and think of all of the scenarios, but we're limited to our experience. Each person is. There's just no way around that, really. So the more diverse the table is, the better chance you're gonna have at like thinking about those scenarios that maybe your team typically wouldn't, and solving for problems that otherwise might not be thought about. So that applies not just to women, but any minorities. And I definitely feel very honored to get to contribute to the problem solving here.
Awesome. Cool. And I know your demo today is also going to be a nod to some very, influential women in the world. And
Yes.
I won't give it away just yet, but my background here, if anyone knows who directed, or anyone knows what film is behind me, and anyone knows who directed it, little tease about what's coming up as we continue along. That being said, we are talking, as I said, UDLC Part 4, all about the maintainability. So last week we talked about deploying your application and all of the governance capabilities that come with, making a successful deployment happen. But as you particularly know, living in production support for a while and seeing that on the front lines, once something is live, that's almost when the journey really begins, because now you're going to be doing everything we talked about for 1 through 3 over and over and over again in this iterative cycle of building, testing, deploying. But then at the same time, you need to make sure that what you've already built, tested, and deployed is running to the nth degree and as best as possible. So, knowing that we're focusing on monitoring, but also just as we're wrapping up the UDLC series as a whole, maybe, since folks already know what it is, I'd love to hear from your perspective, what it's meant to you, and just build on that.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about the toolkit is getting to use all the tools in tandem. They're not like they're not tools that live in isolation, and they're built that way, of course, because we're serving client applications. But also, like, when I'm working on one tool, I might use another one to help me further test functionality or figure out what's going on under the hood. And so they continually inform one another and create like a constant feedback loop. Not only the feedback we're getting from client applications out in the world, but also just our own day-to-day builds. And even while I was preparing for this demo and running through test scenarios and trying to figure out which functionalities I would demo, I had to use a lot of our tools and kind of get a new lesson in one of them. And that was really cool to see, the capabilities here on something that maybe I hadn't specifically worked on in detail, but then realized how powerful it was. So always like learning new things just from using the tools, and especially getting to use them with each other.
Yeah. It's so important, what you were saying about the tools interconnecting. I think that's kind of what we've been trying to really represent over the last few series. Is there are so many phases and so many steps that really go into software development, and ensuring that they're connected, ensuring that it's cohesive, ensuring that you can understand them is what really is going to ensure, again, I can't get over that word today, that you have the best possible thing. And it's every aspect of Uncork, everything from building a module, and seeing that in your applications and your workspaces, and setting up your services. And it's not just the UDLC, it's Uncork as a whole. But you're right, it's so important that when you do something somewhere, anything that it touches is aware of that and can help you look at it from the perspective that you need to look at it from, which is going to vary as you go through your SDLC. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, cool. Unless you have anything else, let's dive in, and let's you show us the application you built and walk us through the tools. I know you're ready to go, and this is the fun part of it. So, let's get rocking and rolling.
Okay. I was definitely doing some last minute changes, so we'll see how this goes, but it'll be fun either way.
Hey, you know what? And I think that's almost perfect for
the theme. Yeah, it's a little too on brand.
Because look, we've all been there. As much as let's look back at those past 3 series, right? No matter how good of a job you do in planning and building and testing and deploying, and having the right process and guardrails set up, there's going to be a reason at some point in time. I think anyone who's been in technology before, really any business for that matter, you're going to ask your boss, the client, somebody's going to ask for a change at the 11th hour. And no
Yeah.
matter whatever processes or rules or whatever you have in place, there's a good chance that sometimes you're going to go ahead and make that, even if it's against your best judgment and a risky decision to do. So it's almost amazing that you did that here. And because you know what's going to happen, you make that change to the 11th hour, and then all of a sudden, you know, the monitoring tools are going to show us are going to start blaring the alarms, and you're going to have to go fix up bad data. And it's almost, again, it's poetic that you were configuring up to the last second here.
Like too poetic, but sure. I mean, I'm glad I just was able to figure out how to share my screen just now. So we'll go from there. You can see my screen, right?
We cannot. I don't know if we need. I don't know if we need our producer to kick us. Hey, I'm seeing a screen come up. I think we're good to go.
Okay. So it should be on the toolkit itself.
Yep, you're on the toolkit. I think we're good to go.
And did I just switch a tab and then switch back?
I do not see a new tab.
Okay. Okay, I see now. All right, so now I should be on a different tab.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to be talking through a couple different tools today. We'll be looking at flexible data manager and then the monitoring dashboards. So under maintain and operate, monitoring actually has a couple dashboards, but we'll be kind of going back and forth between these tools and like was mentioned earlier, seeing kind of how they work in tandem. To start, as Nick mentioned, I do have a theme. So we have iconic films that just happen to be directed by women. So the pre-qualifier of like female filmmaker really has no bearing necessarily. I mean, like it's a filmmaker, just happens to be a woman. CTO just happens to be a woman. So we will start here and then create these submissions and begin working with some data. So I will first go over to Flexible Updater. Let me refresh my screen, confirming that Flexible Data Manager is on the screen.
Yep.
Okay. The first thing to note is that when working with this tool, you need to be working with the schema module. So having a module that has the predefined fields that will belong in your submission, not necessarily the values, but like what fields are important for the submissions you're going to be creating. For ours, we have a film submission schema. And once I select it, I get some additional options. I could create bulk submissions, which I won't do, but just to show the schema fields themselves, it populates with all of the fields. So I have 8 for our schema in no particular order, whether it's certified fresh, this film, is it directed by a woman, who is the director, what's the title, does it include a female writer on the writing team, what's the rating, who are those writers, and what was the year released.
Cool. You said you can create bulk submissions. So I know you're not going to do it because I know you've got some submissions lined up.
Yeah.
But this would basically just generate a bunch of test data for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. You could go through and add value settings depending on whether, you know, if it was film director, you could add in like a name here, or if it is the rating, you could, if you wanted to set it between certain ranges, like I want the rating to belong between these two numbers, you could just set the range and then it would randomize those numbers for the rating values.
Cool. Right. So I know we're doing this. We're on Twitch, so we want our data to be real and the data that you've got. But like, you know, for anyone looking at that and saying, why am I going to do that? I mean, look, we all know sometimes you need a lot of test data.
Right.
And the last thing you want to do is have somebody sit there and walk through your UI 100 times, or you have to go build a script to generate the test data. So it's right there for you to be able to, you know, randomize a bunch of test data. Hit a bunch of different use cases and scenarios, and then start building against that. But again, I know you're not going to show it because you've got some some real films.
Right.
We're
I
talking
do.
about
I do.
real women. Yeah.
And I'm working with a smaller data set, but yeah, I mean, this accepts up to like 25. So if you want to just create a bunch, if your application is going to work with a huge amount of submissions, then this can be helpful to not have to literally map out every single one. But that's what we did for today. So I have 10 I'm going to work with, and it also showcases another functionality, which is that you can import submissions from a file. So if you had an Excel file or a CSV, which is what I'll be using, but just to show what we're working with, I also have it in a Google Sheets document. So the important thing to note here, my CSV will look just like this, but is that at the top here, this first row, the header row, we have these same fields, these camel case fields that you'll recognize are equivalent to what those fields are in the schema. And you want them to be the same so that you can map the values when you're creating your submission. That's just an important thing to note before we actually then go back and begin to add our file.
Yeah. So that's like, I mean, there's another way to create test data. You might be able to use Excel to just generate a bunch of information quick, but also I think that could be like what you're kind of doing here. You pulled that data from somewhere else. Now you need to get it into Uncoder. I think we've all been in that data migration scenario where I have an old system, I need to put my data in a new system, or I'm able to go find data somewhere else that's going to support whatever it is I'm building. I need to get that data in. What you're saying is that is a drag and drop, hit go kind of scenario here.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Cool.
I just brought it in, and now I'm going to upload. I'll get a quick prompt. And yes, I do want to create these submissions. All right, so it says they were created successfully, which means I should be able to go back to my Iconic Films page. And this here is a sort of refresh link to fetch this data. And great, now I do actually have films showing on the page. I set this grid to show 10 entries. So already I'm seeing that I have more than 10. I have 11.
You're on a different tab. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Yes, we just refreshed. Thank you. And I was just talking about that I now have films here, but I wanted to create 10, and I have a second page. This is set to house 10. So I actually have created more than 10. And at the top, you can see there's a duplicate entry. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a classic. There's 2 entries for it. So I can use Flexible Data Manager to remove one of these entries. And then I also need to assign a rating to the remaining one. So if I go back to Flexible Data Manager and I click Update Single Submission, I need to supply it with a submission ID. There's a handy link at the bottom. I can click Browse Submissions here, which will give me the JSON data for these submissions. And right at the top, I see Fast Times at Ridgemont High has a rating that is null. It also has null for this includes a female writer field. So I'm going to delete this one. I grab the submission ID. I come back to Flexible Data Manager. I enter it here, and it should automatically give me 2 action items. I just want to delete the submission, confirm, and it should be gone. So if I go back to Iconic Films, I click my little refresh, and now it is gone. We don't have Fast Times at Ridgemont High at the top anymore. We do still have it as the 3rd entry, but the rating value is missing. So back in the JSON view, I can refresh this screen, and then I'm going to find that remaining entry. So now I've got Fast Times at Ridgemont High. The rating is definitely still null. And back in Flexible Data Manager, I will add this submission ID. And this time I'll click Update Submission. This gives me additional options to begin to build my query and specify the criteria that I want to update. So in the dropdown, we have all of those same schema fields we were seeing earlier. And I specifically want to update rating. Because it was previously, or it currently is a null value, nothing is populating here. And then our new value, Nick, what would you rate this film?
Fast Times?
Yeah.
It was a solid 80s movie, so why don't we give it a solid 8?
All right, that works for me. 8's a great number. And and then we'll add this, and this adds the criteria, the query criteria to the bottom down here. If I wanted to update additional fields, like let's say I kept that one that also had the includes the female writer field set to null. So I had rating and the female writer field both null, and I wanted to update that too. I could add an additional criteria and then update both at the same time. So you can populate this with a number of new values for your schema fields for the specified field that you've selected. And then when you click update submission, it will update all of those.
Excellent.
So let's update. Okay, so one thing that it does also offer is we can view the submission diff. I'll click on this.
Please
and
I said, ooh, please do.
Okay, so we have both submissions. We've got some kind of like top level data here. What I'm really concerned with is if I scroll down, I can actually see my data changes. So what changed? We edited a property. What property? Rating. Old value, as we know, was null, and our new value is 8. So all of those changes are reflected, and we can confirm that this did, in fact, get a rating. If you had a lot of changes, you could confirm that they all went through. And so, yeah, just being able to kind of see that side-by-side visibility and then the confirmation down below.
Yeah, I love that you showed this, because actually when I was looking, even when you started this demo and you were on the UDLC toolkit page, I noticed submission revisions wasn't on our agenda, but it was under the maintain section of the UDLC. And here it is, right? You're able to bring it up. So, I mean, for folks that don't know, and probably not, that's why we're talking about it right now. So when you save data in Uncork, every change that is made is stored as a separate revision. So you could look, there's so many things you could do with that, right? So it's not like you're only ever seeing a snapshot in time, and you're effectively kind of doing like a database backup at any point, at every single save to a data and any property in that data. So number one, you have that auditing, you have that compliance, and you have those, that safeguard through that. How many times have you heard people, oh, I got to roll back my database, roll it back to this time, roll it back to that time. You don't want to have to roll back an entire database. With anytime you do that, you're going to lose things that you wanted to have happen along with the things that you didn't want to have happen. This, on a per record basis, allows you to selectively do those types of things. And then it's like you're showing here, also very easily view the differences in submissions, and see how the data changed and what was added and all that. So I'm so happy that you clicked this button. We would have been remiss to pass.
Honestly, submission revisions is invaluable, not only as like a daily creator, but like when I was on support as well, like being able to have the ability to go back and restore something like a specific submission, or if something got changed unexpectedly, like having the flexible data manager to update submissions and change values to something new if needed, but also then to reference what was there before, like those two things, again, like this in tandem element, invaluable.
Yeah. And then also, like, as you did this update here, like, and you showed a delete, you showed an update, very controlled, right? Like you only were able to update fields, obviously, that existed with certain types. And, you're not the one constructing the delete request, right? You're basically just giving it the input.
Right.
And, I don't know if you've seen this before in your production support life, but I know when I've done production support, there's always that time. You always hear the nightmares of somebody fat fingering a SQL query back in the day, right? Like, oh, I forgot to put my, where clause at the end, and oops, I accidentally updated every single record in my database. Yikes. So I think, here you've got it controlled. So you avoid, potential problems with doing these types of things, which are common, and then also you have that history. So worst case scenario, you somehow find your way around those controls. It's not the end of the world. You're not rolling back everything. You're able to target it, right?
Yeah, totally. Definitely helps to have those checks along the way to just really make absolutely sure you're changing what you want to change. And if you do make a mistake, like there's an easier way to get that back, and you haven't ruined everything.
Yep. Awesome.
So we'll go back really quick to the iconic films page. I think I closed out the submissions diff, and that stopped my screen sharing for a second, but I should be back. And if I click again to refresh, now I have my fast times at Ridgemont High rating. Awesome. So all of my films have ratings and all of their data, except we don't have anything for this certified fresh field. And we want to. So spoiler alert, they're all going to be true. We want to see true values because these are all fresh films, but I should be seeing this on the page here. And I have this button that is set to run a process to update my submissions by evaluating whether or not the rating is above a certain threshold, and if it is directed by a woman, and also if it includes any women on the writers team. So it's looking at those fields and then determining whether or not it's fresh. And because these are all great films, they all are. But I want to make sure that my update film module runs smoothly. And that's going to take me over really quickly, or take me over to alerts as part of the monitoring tools. As mentioned, monitoring has a number of or 3 dashboards. We have metrics, we have logs, and we have alerts. And the alerts dashboard basically uses data from the metrics dashboard and the logs dashboard. I will kind of, as I mentioned, go back and forth, but to start, I'm going to create a new alert, and I'm going to create it on the specific module that is set to update my film submissions. So let me grab that module ID. And back in alerts, if I click create new alert, I get a pop-up and I can define my alert. If I do want to create it on a metric, I can select from this drop-down, which includes the various metrics we show on the metrics dashboard, and it will populate a graph that shows like the real-time data for this particular metric in this environment. I can set the threshold timing, let's say, I don't know, every 1 day, and then if we set the alert threshold to 20, we'll see that our red threshold line has adjusted to give us a visual indicator of, is this a meaningful threshold? Is this going to be valuable? You set a name, you set a priority 1 through 5, and then you add a recipient because the alert needs to go to somebody. Somebody needs to be made aware of if this gets triggered. So I'm actually going to create one on logs, since that's what we're looking at, and I will add all the relevant details. You can create on an error or slow log. We're going to look at error logs for this module. So this is a module ID I grabbed from my update film submissions module. I'm going to set a very short threshold timing and a very small alert threshold because I want this to trigger while we're on this call. Update film submissions error. I'll give this a middle range P3, and then add myself as a recipient. Babe, you can add multiple recipients, so I could also add Nick. If you have like a group email and there's like a team of people that you need to notify, you can add that in. When I create my alert, it'll take a moment and I should get a successful response. And then I'll click apply filters to see my brand new alert show up on the screen, update film submissions. Right now it shows no data because we literally just created it and it needs like at least a minute to run before it has some data to work with. But we'll come back to this in a bit.
Yeah, but I just want to just pause there for a second. Like you made one comment, like you set the low threshold because you wanted it to alert while we're on this call, right? Or while we're out here streaming to the world of no code enthusiasts.
Right.
That's so important. Like, of course, you're not going to set one request in 1 minute, but the idea that you want to be alerted the moment it happens, whether you're streaming on Twitch, whether you're sleeping, whether you're in a meeting, like the moment something goes wrong, you need to know. And that's what's obviously critical about this. Like, I know you're going to show us some metrics. You showed me that graph, and, there's obviously going to be dashboards coming up that show those graphs, but like what you need is that immediate notification the moment it happens. And we're going to get that here. And that's what you need when you're running these production systems. You can't expect people are going to sit there and watch statistics and watch charts and everything. Like, it's got to be proactive. So, the moment it happens, you got to be ready to get in there and fix whatever's going wrong for your users. So
yeah, of course. And again, having that versatility of like, okay, how can I really specify, very specific criteria for what I want to be monitoring, what I want to look at. Like I, for the purposes of this demo, like even being able to set an alert for the purposes of this demo. So I want it to trigger on one thing at one time, but like in a real world scenario, like if you're looking at a very critical process and you need to know only on this one thing, like it is the most critical, being able to define that and the thresholds and the other various settings is awesome and super important.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just add to that too. Like when you were saying there, knowing what to alert on, like there's an endless amount of things that you could in theory alert in your application, right? In any application from any infrastructure, you can alert on, everything from, you showed us CPU. I know there's network, there's memory, there's probably other statistics of a server's health that you could, if you wanted to, measure on. And that could be overwhelming, I think, for a lot of people. You go into whatever your monitoring tool is, and if we give you every single metric under the sun, what is a meaningful metric? Like, that's so important when you're defining these alerts and you're looking at the metrics, is that you're ensuring that you're looking at the things that matter. And to your point earlier, setting those thresholds that matter. That's why I thought it was so cool when you showed that red line through the middle. You're like, all right, well, I'm going to choose this value of CPU because that sounds bad. And then you go look at your actual graph and you're like, oh, we've never even come close to that before.
Relevant.
Or we're always higher than that, but everything seems to be going just fine. Why would I alert on that value? So helping you, number one, curating. I think it's like curating the metrics that matter, that we have seen, that, the experts have seen are going to result in problems either now or later. And then giving you the right info to make the right decisions of, okay, once I know which of the 5, very important metrics available to me, I'm looking at what's the right threshold for me. Because you want your alerts to be meaningful. You don't want to be alerted nonstop because your CPU is over 10%, because you thought that was bad, but in reality, like, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So true. Okay, so I'm back on the iconic films page. I have, as I mentioned, are these films fresh button, and this is going to make that update film submissions call. So I'm hoping when I click it that I would start to see values here, but I'm not. I did set an alert, so I'm clicking it multiple times because I really do want to trigger it if it's not running properly.
Yeah. Well, also, that's what your users are going to do, right? I mean,
exactly.
You haven't seen a user. If something doesn't work, they're just going to smash. Like, you all should be smashing the subscribe button right now. And hopefully Twitch, the TW, screw me, throw me for a loop. But hopefully you smash it, and hopefully it works. I think Twitch, and hopefully if Twitch's button doesn't work, they have set up some alerts to make sure that button works. And if not, if they don't have it, well, then we should rebuild Twitch in Uncork and set up alerts in this dashboard so we won't miss any of your subscribes.
That was an amazing segue. Okay, so I've clicked this multiple times. I will jump really quick to, here is the metrics dashboard and what we were just talking about. And then I'll jump to the logs dashboard to sort of round out the monitoring element. But as Nick mentioned, we have these graphs that are supposed to be an indicator of what is important to look at in your environment so that you can have a whole picture view of what's going on. Do things look steady? Do you see a crazy spike somewhere? And again, mentioning that sort of in tandem element, using the metrics dashboard in tandem with the logs dashboard or with service logs and with alerts, which by nature uses data from these two other dashboards to get that view of what's happening and where you can zero in on maybe if there is an issue. This does look at database server metrics as well as application server metrics, and you can look at various things. Down at the bottom, we have operations by type. I actually might need to refresh this. But looking at my network traffic, how many, if I have operations, like how many insert versus update do I have? We can look at connections, memory usage versus the threshold, the total that's set. So various things that you can start to like piece together and create the full picture.
Yeah, and look, you can filter by dates too, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
maybe you had people. Oh, we had a bunch. People were complaining that the site wasn't working at a certain point. Yesterday at 5:00, we got a lot of requests that it wasn't working. Go back, look at all your metrics. Like, well, was my CPU out of control there? Then from that, you go say, all right, well, maybe what, and then you get it. You're like, you can dig.
I know. I'm like, I forgot. I think this is UT or military time, which I always have to calculate.
Hey, 24-hour time. It just so happens that America's military, the only people in America who've decided to use 24-hour time, but the rest of the world does use 24-hour time.
This is true. That's why I started using myself. I should have done that easier. It shouldn't have taken me that much time to think about what's 4:00, but here we are. Yeah. That's what happens on a live demo.
Are we live? Is it recording? Oh yeah, look at that, live in the top corner.
So if I do apply these filters, I can get that view of what was happening yesterday between the hours of 4 and 6 p.m. And yeah, all that data is available there. I will transition over quickly to the logs dashboard. So with the logs dashboard and monitoring, I know on a previous stream, service logs was discussed, and logs dashboard and service logs are kind of like cousins. They definitely can be used together. And the important thing to note about logs dashboard is that it's really giving you, again, that look into maybe something that's going wrong, or like where you could begin to isolate your search if you're trying to figure out the root cause of a problem. So it's going to return to you logs that are error logs and slow logs. So either they are giving status codes in the 400s or 500s, or if it's slow, they're taking longer than 2 seconds to complete. And this is also useful to start determining patterns. So if I have this, like, let's say module ID, let's say if this EEB one was taking like over 20 seconds to complete every single time, 20, 25, whatever, that would be an indication that something is, it's not just a fluke, something is probably needs to be looked at there. And I can begin to hone in or, get further into my search. Let me refresh this page.
Yeah. So on the slow, so you said it's 2 seconds, right?
Yes.
Now, like these, for folks wondering, like that's the 2 seconds. We're showing you that these things are slow, right? That's not going to trigger an alert for anything that takes over 2 seconds. You can go in, and when you set an alert to trigger on a log that's slow, you define what slow is, because slow can vary based on the module, right? If you have a very simple module, it should sure as heck take less than 2 seconds. I know that, 1 second is like the benchmark for a really performant website, so if your server is taking more than 2 seconds, you're never going to appease to the search engine, ranking gods out there who are going to ding you on that. So what you want to monitor for, the slow might vary. If it's a data intensive process that runs, off on the side in the background, maybe that's okay. But maybe there you want to say, hey, if this runs over 60 seconds, then I want to alert. But, that 2 seconds is, again, knowing that, speed is so important for your end users, right? More as well as for the health of your environment. The longer you're taking in one job, the more jobs start building up on one another. So, as you said, you look for patterns there. Like, you can also think about it from 2 ways, right? Like, I go into my metrics and my CPU shot up. and my SOL log shot up.
Hmm.
So like you can use, I think you can use these information it to say, well, was it my slow logs that created my CPU to go up, or did my
Hmm.
CPU go up for
Right.
something else, which then started to slow down my logs? So
Yeah,
using those time frames and sequences will help you get, I think, to the bottom of it.
absolutely. Yeah. Great point, and definitely a critical piece of like these tools together. So quickly on the logs dashboard, I have refreshed, and now we can see, speaking of patterns, that we have a bunch of 412s for the same module ID. And this actually is a familiar module ID because this is what I created the alert on. This is my update film submission. So here I'm seeing that 967 is getting a bunch of 412s back. I should have received, yes, I should have received errors for this. So I do have an email that came, actually multiple, because I did click that button multiple times, showing me that this criteria has been met. So I have at least one error log in the last 1 minute for this URL that I specified in my environment. It gives me the time and informs me that this is an alert that has been triggered. And then I'll see if I can pull it up. But we also, maybe now, speaking of using tools in tandem, can use the service logs dashboard to try and figure out, why is this call failing?
Right. Yeah, and that's right, because that's they're different usage, and this is, I think, where a lot of folks, when we released the logs dashboard, they're like, wait, but you have a logs dashboard. So what's this logs dashboard? And like you said, they're cousins. They serve different purposes. You're going to get the volume of requests in your logs dashboard.
Mhm.
You get thousands and thousands and
Right,
thousands of records, but it doesn't have the kind of information service logs has,
right.
because this is the transactional information that's going to help you debug. So, like you said, they're cousins. And I think, honestly, I don't know about you. Hamilton, do you have a lot of cousins?
I have six. Yeah, I have cousins.
I've only got three, but if any of my cousins are out there, and apologies to any of my siblings who are out there right now, I love the cousin relationship. Like you're kind of, I know this is completely off topic, but like you're like a brother or sister. Like you're still close, but since you have different parents, you have like different perspectives on one another's parents. Where
Yeah,
like, they talk about it as like aunt and uncle, and you talk about it as mom and dad, and it's like
right.
different. And I don't know. I just had to, since you said cousins a few times. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I fight less with my cousins and my sisters, so there's
that
that too.
too, right? There's so much less. There's like no pressure in your
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly, exactly. Um, so I found one of the service logs that is our failure, and in the response body, we can see, if we sort of scroll through, that we're getting the submissions undefined, and the component is plug update submission. So I know that when I'm trying to send this request, like something is not going through properly. It's not getting the data that it needs to complete the request. And so I will um, if I go to my module and I find plug update submissions and I look down and see what's being sent, oh, I recognize that actually the field that I'm where I'm setting submission ID is really called submission ID. It's not an abbreviated version. So I had sub ID. Uh, Hence, it's not sending anything of value in that request, and the call is failing. I'll
By the way,
save.
Chloe, actually, I just noticed this. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, Hamilton. But if anyone's has a very close eye on this, you'll notice the top of the page looks a little different from what a lot of you uncorkers might be used to. We are working, or Hamilton is working, out of a cutting edge uncork environment,
Hmm.
and our engineers and product and designers and everybody on our platform department has been working hard to put a nice, fresh coat of paint on, and usability along with that paint onto a number of pieces. So you're looking at the brand new header of our module builder now. It's got your app and it's got your workspace in it, all part of our design system implementation. So I don't know. I think it looks great.
Yeah, it does look great. It really does. All right, I'm back in Iconic Films. I have adjusted my update film submission so that we're now sending in the correct field, which should have a value to update these, if I click my "Are these films fresh?" button, I'm hoping that I will get a value back. I may need, okay, I did, but it's the wrong value. So I spoiled this before. They're all supposed to be true. And I know that they're supposed to be true, maybe based on like the business logic that someone gave me for this application. Like I already know these pieces of data are supposed to evaluate and come up with a true result. So maybe I don't have time to go into my config and figure out, okay, where is this logic failing? Is it just simply switching the wires, and instead of setting true, it's setting false because it's mapping wrong? But I can I can use Flexible Data Manager to update all of these if I'm working within a time crunch.
Right. And you gave a great example of that earlier. You said, what if it's award season coming up, you know?
Right. It is award season.
It is
So
award
we're
season.
submitting all of these films for awards. And I don't have time to try and figure this out where it's happening in my config. So what I
Right.
want to do is update this manually, and I
Right.
will switch over.
Because I mean, folks, like that, I know that that's happened to me 1,000 times, and you know, you see
Yeah,
a problem,
definitely
it's
situations of this.
right, it's impacting your end users. Any problems you have are going to immediately in production are immediately going to impact your end user, and that's the last thing you want to happen. You know, it's okay if it's okay. There's a bunch of errors that they don't know about, but you definitely don't ever want your users to see it, and definitely if it's, you know, you're submitting these things to, you know, the for awards that you want your data to be good. We all know that sometimes the process to find the issue, replicate the issue, fix the issue, re-promote the issue, rerun whatever process the issue that went wrong, that might take too long. And you just want, similar to how we talked about rollbacks last week, sometimes you just need to say, I got to fix it for my end users, and then I'm going to worry about fixing the root cause, but let me just get my users going again. And I think that's, you know, that seems exactly on here.
Definitely. So we're going to do just that. We're going to make this bulk update to these submissions. I know I just created all these submissions while I was on this demo. So I'm going to pull them all back using the created field in our Flexible Data Manager field name option. Set the condition greater than or equal to and add it. Then this was a error from earlier, but we've got our greater than or equal to our created timestamp, and then we have a total of 10 submissions, which is the number of submissions that we have in our iconic films list. And here I will click update film submissions. This is similar to the single. I will select certified fresh. They are all true. Add this query. Yeah. And then when I click update submissions, when I go back to my iconic films page, I should be able to refresh my list and see that they're all certified fresh.
We still got Flex Up.
Oh,
man. Flexible man. There we go.
Oh, almost so seamless, but that's what happens when you're live. It did just update to true. Well, we saw that it was false before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, and I love that you also showed it said 10 are going to be updated. I mean, remember my, you know, scenario where someone forgets to put the where clause on and updates 1 million records. Like, you probably should have run the query first, see what's the impact, and run it again. You know, this is, if you type that in and it says submissions to update 47,950, you probably don't want to hit the OK button. You know, you know it ahead of time. You know the impact of what you're doing. And then again, even if you screw up, you've got those revisions to catch you. Get back.
Lots of guardrails along the way, which is always helpful.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. That is my demo.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap, right? Isn't that what directors say when they're done?
That's filming? A wrap. That's a wrap. Yes.
All right, cool. Well, hey, this is International Women's Month. You are the director of this demo, so I'll let you sign off today and, you know, say what you want, but maybe say that's a wrap too.
Cool. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Nick for facilitating a really interesting discussion about the value of these tools. It's been awesome to get to work on them and to get to use them as well. So looking forward to more.
All right. Awesome. And wait, and what is this? What is that?
Oh, that's a wrap. That's a
That's a wrap. All
that's
right.
a